They're not afraid of your voice, they're afraid of your vision, because the moment you saw things for what they really were, something shifted, not outside within you. You stopped begging for clarity and started breathing it. You stopped running in circles and started walking straight through the fog, and they felt it. They always do, because people who survive by illusion can sense when someone is no longer fooled. You weren't supposed to question the script. You weren't supposed to pause, observe, and feel what didn't align, but you did, and now you're a threat not because you're loud, but because you're aware. You carry the quiet kind of danger, the kind that doesn't shout but sees, the kind that doesn't react but knows, and knowledge, real knowledge, it unnerves them because it doesn't need revenge, it doesn't need proof, it just exists, and in that stillness their power unravels. That's why they're scared, not because you found out but because now they can't hide. The lie was their power until you saw through it. They always depended on your confusion. That was their strategy from the beginning, to make you doubt what you saw, question what you felt, and second, guess what you knew deep down. That fog they created, it was deliberate. A carefully crafted illusion where you were made to feel like the unstable one, the emotional one, the overthinker. But now the fog has cleared, and you're no longer standing where they left you. You've changed, not loudly, not with fireworks, but with something far more threatening, clarity. You saw through the lies. You traced them back to their source, peeled off the layers, and found the truth hiding behind the masks. And that moment, that awakening, is what scares them the most, because the power they had over you was never real. It was borrowed from your silence, from your loyalty, from your innocence. They didn't control you, they controlled your belief system, the belief that they were right, that you were wrong, that you owed them something. But now that spell is broken, and once the truth enters your system, it can't be undone. You no longer respond the same. You no longer feel guilt for breathing or shame for thinking. You no longer need their validation to exist. And with every step you take in truth, their foundation crumbles. You were the believer that kept the illusion alive. You were the light they used to cast shadows. But now you've turned inward. You've stopped feeding the lie. And it terrifies them, because for the first time they're not in control of the narrative you are. They can't twist what you know. They can't gaslight your silence. They can't guilt trip your distance. They're left with the weakest weapon of all, pretending nothing happened. But you see it now. The patterns, the manipulation, the contradictions, all of it. And with every lie they try to reuse, you respond with silence. Not submission but strategy, not fear but distance. You've become the one thing they can't handle, someone who knows, someone who sees the truth and no longer flinches, and in your calm, their chaos has nowhere to land. That's why they panic. That's why they avoid you or try to provoke you, because your awareness strips them of the one thing they could always rely on: control. And once they lose control over your mind, your emotions, your perspective, they lose everything. That is why they're scared. Not because you're angry, but because you're awake. Truth strips them of control. They never feared your strength. They feared the moment you'd stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because the truth, once seen, changes the entire dynamic. Control only works when the other person is unaware, when they doubt their instincts, when they keep giving chances that were never earned. That's how they operated under the illusion that you'd never catch on. They cloaked their manipulation in charm, their control in concern, their selfishness in sacrifice. And for a while it worked. They had control over your emotions, your time, your mind. But the truth didn't arrive with noise. It came quietly, almost like a whisper at first, a moment of clarity, a single contradiction, a gut feeling that wouldn't go away. And once it entered you, it began to unravel everything. You started noticing patterns you once dismissed. You stopped making excuses for their behavior. You questioned the things that never made sense but were passed off as your fault. And that's when the control began to die. Because once you see how the strings were being pulled, you stop dancing, you stop performing, you stop being predictable, and that terrifies someone who depends on control to feel powerful. The truth makes you immune to manipulation, and immunity is fatal to those who feed off your confusion. They can't guilt-trip you when you no longer feel responsible for their mess. They can't bait you into arguments when you understand it's a trap. They can't flatter you back into compliance when you've already recognized the cycle. You're not reacting like you used to. You're not explaining, defending, or overcompensating anymore. And they're left scrambling, because control without confusion has no teeth. It collapses, and here's the thing: they know it. They can feel the shift in your energy, the groundedness in your silence. You don't have to announce you've seen the truth. Your stillness says it all. You're no longer hooked by the performance. You're watching it now, detached, and they can sense it. That's why they suddenly act strange, cold, erratic. It's fear. They're trying to reassert power through panic or punishment. But deep down, they know it's slipping, because you've detached from the illusion that they were ever the stable one. The protector, the victim, you've replaced their script with your own clarity. And when someone loses control over a person who's finally thinking for themselves, they don't know what to do. They may try harder. They may disappear. They may smear your name. But none of that matters anymore, because they don't have access to the place where the real war was being fought, your mind. And that is what truly breaks them. The truth didn't just set you free. It made them powerless, and nothing terrifies them more than that. They pretended. You believed that was the agreement. It was an unspoken deal. They would wear the mask, and you would believe it. Not because you were weak, but because you were kind. You saw the good in them. You filled in the gaps they left blank. You excused the inconsistencies, softened the red flags, and held on to the version of them they wanted you to see. That was the agreement they perform, and you don't ask too many questions. But something shifted, not in them, but in you. You began to feel it, the tension between what they said and what they did, the distance between who they pretended to be and what your gut was screaming underneath the surface. You started to notice things. Small things, yes, but consistent. The way they twisted facts, avoided responsibility, changed their tone depending on who was watching. And that's when the contract began to crumble. Because the moment you stopped cooperating with the illusion, they felt the walls shaking. Your silence used to be their safety net. Your belief used to be their disguise. But now you were looking at them, really looking, and it unnerved them. Because they were never scared of being exposed by words, they were scared of being seen without the act. You didn't confront them with accusations, you didn't scream, you simply understood, and that alone shifted the balance. Your awareness became too loud to ignore. Your questions, even unspoken, echoed through the spaces where lies used to breathe freely. And they began to panic, not outwardly at first but inside, because they knew something had changed. You weren't chasing their approval, you weren't justifying their contradictions, you weren't asking for crumbs anymore. You were watching, detached, observing, remembering, and that's when the fear settled in for them, because they realized the performance had failed, the mask was slipping, and the only person who had ever truly believed in them now saw through it all. That kind of clarity can't be reversed. That kind of knowing can't be undone, and they know it. That's why they avoid deep conversations. That's why they change the subject, get defensive, or try to make you feel guilty. They're trying to rebuild the mask, but you're no longer buying it. The agreement is broken. You don't need closure from them because you already have it from within. You've seen too much to go back. You've awakened from the role you were cast in, and now their fear isn't that you'll expose them to the world. Their fear is that you'll never again believe in them, because that belief, your trust, your faith, your love was their stage. And now the curtain has fallen, the act is over, and they're left facing the one thing they never prepared for, being truly seen. The truth makes you immune to their tricks. There was a time when their tactics worked. Every guilt trip hit your heart like a knife. Every cold silence made you feel like you were the problem. and every sudden shift in mood made you scramble to fix something you didn't even break. You were reactive, emotionally available, always trying to restore peace, and they relied on that. They knew which strings to pull, which words to say, and which wounds to press to keep you wrapped in their game. But that was before you saw the pattern, before you realized their behavior wasn't accidental, it was strategic. You began connecting the dots, and that changed everything. Not immediately. The change was gradual, internal, quiet. But it was powerful, because the truth, once seen, becomes a kind of armor. You stopped jumping to apologize. You stopped explaining your intentions to someone who never cared to understand them. You stopped feeling responsible for their chaos. And with that, their tricks lost their sting. They would go cold and you'd stay calm. They'd provoke and you'd remain still. They'd twist the facts and you wouldn't even flinch. That shift in you, that's what scares them now, because their tactics only work on confusion, not on clarity. They need you to doubt yourself, to need their approval, to seek their validation, and the moment you stopped doing that, their entire strategy collapsed. You're no longer reacting, you're observing, and that unnerves them, because manipulation needs movement, it needs reaction, it needs access, and you've quietly taken all of that away. They try to bait you with silence, guilt, or drama, but it lands on stone, because you no longer personalize their moods. You've learned that their emotional chaos isn't your responsibility to clean up. That's not cruelty, it's wisdom. You're not playing cold, you're playing clear. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful answer is no answer at all. That stillness isn't weakness, it's strategy, and they hate it. They hate that the same person who once fought to be understood is now walking away without a word. They hate that their once effective tactics now look like nothing more than noise to you. But most of all, they hate that you've built immunity not to them as a person, but to the illusion they projected. You see them now fully, and when you see someone clearly, you don't get caught in the trap, you walk right past it. That immunity is what terrifies them, because it means they've lost access to your mind. It means their power wasn't real, it was borrowed from your confusion. And now that you're clear, they're powerless, not because you fought back, but because you stopped reacting, you stopped engaging. You simply outgrew the illusion, and there is no manipulation in the world that can survive a mind that has chosen peace over performance. They know you can't unsee it. There's a moment, quiet but irreversible, when something clicks inside you. When the truth, raw and undeniable, settles in your bones and refuses to leave. You don't shout it from the rooftops. You don't need to, because the shift is internal, permanent. You can't unsee the manipulation, the subtle cruelty, the performative empathy that once held you captive. You can't pretend you didn't notice how love was used as a tool, how your silence was taken for submission, how your empathy became their opportunity. And the moment they realized you saw it, truly saw it, was the moment fear took root in them. Because people like that don't fear confrontation. They fear clarity. They fear that you now understand the script, that you've learned the lines behind their mask, that you've begun watching instead of reacting. They fear that your eyes no longer look up to them, they look through them. And that's why their behavior changes. That's why they shift between charm and cruelty, between silence and panic. It's not confusion, it's fear. Because they know the illusion has expired, and what scares them most is that you won't play the part anymore. They know there's no going back. You're not seeking closure, not trying to prove a point, not waiting for validation. You've already found it in the truth itself, and truth doesn't need to scream to be felt. It lives in your calmness, in your quiet distance, in the way you no longer chase what used to consume you. They see it in your eyes, the way you no longer look for the good in someone who showed you every reason not to, the way you no longer give away pieces of yourself just to keep the peace, and that realization, it shatters them, because now they're powerless not just over you, but over how they're remembered. The version of them you once loved has died in your memory, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. And that truth carries weight. It means their performance failed. It means their hold on you is broken. It means you're no longer vulnerable to their tactics, because you know them now deeply, fully, painfully. And you can't know it. That's what makes you powerful. Not revenge, not anger, but awareness. You walk differently now. You respond slower. You protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And they feel it. They sense that their chapter in your story has ended, not with rage, but with realization. And that's a kind of ending they can't control, can't rewrite, can't twist into their favor. So they'll call you cold, distant, changed, but deep down they know the truth. You saw what they hoped you'd never see, and now that you've seen it, you can't ever go back.